Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. Becky Crowe has always loved swimming.
Very good.
And she's tried to share that joy. In communities where there's limited access, she's taught people to swim.
Good.
She's also worked with people who have had traumatic near-drowning experiences. This past summer, her passion for swimming brought her to Greece. Becky joined an NGO called Yoga and Sport with Refugees, which helps refugees primarily from Syria, Afghanistan, Congo, and Egypt. Becky volunteered with the NGO in Lesvos, Greece, where she taught refugees how to swim. Becky Crowe, who I'm proud to say is the daughter of my cousin Jack, is here with me now. Becky, welcome to American Voices.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be here.
So, when did you first learn to swim?
I learned to swim when I was about 3 years old when we were living in Minnesota, which sounds counterintuitive, but I had my first swimming lessons when I was 3 or 4 years old.
This is when your parents worked at Mayo.
It is, exactly. And they wanted us to be water safe. And so they threw us in a pool with our clothes on to make sure we could get to the side of the pool. And soon thereafter, we moved to Arizona, and my parents sold my ice skates and dunked us in the pool as our primary sport. Made a lot more sense as our sport than ice skating did in Phoenix.
So you actually were coaching when you were 12 years old?
I started, my first job was coaching younger swimmers. I started that at right around 6th grade and worked with younger kids on our swim team, and also did a number of private lessons with 3, 4, 5-year-olds as they were learning to swim as well.
And then you went on and you swam in college.
I did, yes. I was focused on my swimming as a major part of my college experience, and had an incredible opportunity to swim at Stanford with, at the time, it was the national championship swim team. And we were able to have a great run of it in terms of our success in the water. But I'd say most importantly, these women continue to be my very best friends and people who we've gone through 35 years of life together now. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So it's a tremendous gift. Isn't
that always amazing how sports can team bonds people in ways that are unique?
It really is. It's a shared, so many parts of the shared experience.
You've even given me a few lessons.
I have more to give too. We're going to work on your hip rotation.
On my stroke. On moving my body.
Exactly. That's the important thing, though. Just even floating around in the water is therapeutic, but getting really efficient is the key.
And what does that mean? Tell me, what does that mean? I'm sure there are people out there who don't know. I didn't know.
Sure. If you think about maybe the difference between swimming through molasses or syrup versus water, I think we're going for the water look here. Really, there are ways to move your body through the water so that you, in technical terms, you're reducing that coefficient of friction, if you will. So you're thinking about, how do I cut through the water with the least energy possible so that I can really utilize my energy to keep going longer and farther, rather than trying to correct for mistakes in the water that are making it less efficient.
So let's talk about the day you were moved to volunteer to help refugees. What did you see and what moved you, and what did you do to take the first step?
So ever since I was a little girl, as you know, I grew up in Arizona and had been, as a very young person, had been curious about the border and why borders exist. Why do people need to move across borders? And have had a long career of work in the nonprofit sector. But I was really particularly moved when the Syrian crisis was happening about 6 or 7 years ago. I saw all of these people crossing in the news, crossing the Aegean from Turkey to various islands in Greece. And I was wondering what that must feel like to make that crossing, to make a crossing that could potentially save your life, but could also potentially take your life. I've been paying attention to that issue for a number of years now and was really curious about whether anyone was working on teaching people to swim who had been through this experience, and understanding that it would be a group that's faced a lot of trauma and particularly traumatic experiences in the water. So I literally Googled swimming and refugees, and that is how I found the organization that I went to work with this summer.
It's amazing.
It was the first thing that popped up, which was kind of a miracle. I think the universe was working its magic there.
You Googled and yoga and sport with refugees came up, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you found the name of the organization and what they did. It was right down your alley. But how difficult was it for you actually to decide that you were going to go do this? You were going to go to Greece, to an island you'd never been, with an organization you just encountered, to teach refugees how to swim. Work us through that thought process.
As a single mom of a 17-year-old, I had a few logistical pieces to work out, including how I was going to continue to do my day job from Greece and where my son was going to spend the summer. But I thought it was at least worth a conversation with the organization. So it was actually a few days before my 50th birthday, which was meaningful. And I had an incredible conversation with the volunteer coordinator at Yoga and Sport. I had no idea if this organization, I had no background whatsoever. And they had a Google form on the website that was the application. It was very informal. But when I spoke with them, I learned more about the organization, and I learned that they had been around for about 5 years, and they were doing a number of different sports with refugees when they arrived on the island of Lesvos. And they typically have refugees coaching the sports, but they didn't have anyone who knew how to coach swimming. And so I was excited about the possibility of going not only to teach swimming directly, but to teach some of their volunteers and prospective coaches how to continue the work after I left. So I signed up and I made a plan to be in Greece for a month this past summer.
Was it hard for you to take off work, or were you anxious at all about this?
I was a bit anxious, also excited, but I thankfully have flexible work. My clients, especially with the 9-hour time difference, were happy to have me doing work in the evenings in Greece, which translated back to the workday here. And so I was able to continue some of my projects over there while I was working with the refugees during the day.
What does the NGO do exactly, and why is sports important to it?
So I think a bit of this comes from the relationship with Lesvos in terms of the arrival of refugees on the island there. Essentially, it is one of the closest islands to Turkey, to the coast of Turkey. So it's about a 12-kilometer channel there, or seven-ish miles in terms of the channel. People come on a daily basis, mostly on rubber boats that come across the channel there. When they come to Lesvos, that is their first stop in the European Union. So when you initially arrive in the European Union, wherever your first location is, you need to go through a process to apply for asylum. That process can take weeks, months, and sometimes years. As a refugee, you're living in a refugee camp there on the island. There's about 3,000 people at any given time in the recent years living at the camp where I worked. And you're basically waiting for the next step in your process. You're waiting for an interview, an asylum interview, to be able to tell your story about why your home country was unlivable. That waiting process is really difficult from a number of reasons. I mean, you can imagine any of us waiting with a ton of uncertainty in our lives for anything is difficult. And in this situation where you've left your family, often left your family and your home, and don't know what to expect next, it's a particularly unsettling period of time. And in that, the young woman who started Yoga and Sport with refugees is a French woman named Estelle, who was a humanitarian volunteer on Lesvos during the Syrian crisis. And she befriended an Afghan man who was an incredible boxer. They became friends, started to chat together about working out. They're both great athletes. And he said to her, "Estelle, will you teach me English?" And she said, "If you'll teach me boxing and also teach me Farsi." And So the two of them struck up a friendship and started working out together, and more people started joining them for their workouts. And over the last 6 years, they've basically built an organization that offers about 10 different sports at any given time, from boxing to soccer to rock climbing, volleyball, you name it. And each of those sports is coached by a refugee. And it is such an incredible way, for so many reasons that you and I both know about athletics and physical and mental health. It offers a couple of hours during the day that enables people to stay healthy, to stay physically fit, to build community, to learn English skills, because there's about 9 or 10 different languages represented among the refugees.
And they're there waiting for what?
They are waiting for a series of steps. The first one is to what they call getting their interview. And they may wait for a month or 2 or 4 months just to get the first interview. And that's typically an interview with a person who is documenting their first claim for asylum. So the way that process typically works is that someone needs to sit with the interviewer and essentially describe the really horrific things that have happened in their homeland or to them personally as they've been through this migrant journey. I heard stories and bits and pieces from the friends that I made over the course of the summer, things like being in Eritrea, being asked would be a soft word for this, but conscripted into the military as a 14-year-old. And if you refuse, it's essentially almost an enslavement situation. If you refuse, then your parents are potentially put in solitary confinement, et cetera. So it's I had friends with knife wounds on their chests, and a friend who lost his leg as a 14-year-old in Afghanistan and was beaten by his factory, the person who ran the factory where he worked. And then, of course, just the war in Sudan and food crisis in Ethiopia, civil war in Ethiopia and Eritrea. And everyone had their stories. I talked to a young man. I was telling him about my son, and we were talking. I asked him about his mother, and he got teary and didn't share much, but he just said, she's from Ethiopia, but he said she's living underground, and he has no way of knowing if she's still alive right now. And very dear friend from Afghanistan, whose older sister is a teacher and has a master's degree, nonprofit leader in Afghanistan, but she's not allowed to work anymore with the Taliban, and they're about to lose their house.
I mean, she's not allowed to work because she's a woman?
Because she's a woman, exactly. So, and she was their primary breadwinner to keep them in their house. So these are just a few of the stories, but there were many, and I learned a great deal about Eritrea. It's a country that's, I don't think, on our radar much in the U.S., and yet, rivals North Korea in terms of the lack of liberal democracy there. And there were a huge number of Eritreans in the camp. About 30% of the camp was comprised of Eritreans. So I made many Eritrean friends. They were some of our most committed swimmers, and still very much in touch with them as they're moving through their journey.
So, and where do they live, and how do they eat, and how many are allowed to stay?
Well, that has really ranged over the last 8 to 10 years. So during the peak of the Syrian crisis, there were 100,000 Syrians who came to Lesvos. And the entire population of the island is 85,000 people. So you can imagine an influx of doubling the population on the island. If you look on a map for Ayvalık, Turkey, that's the counterpart city across the channel from Lesvos, and it's in the North Aegean Sea. So it really is, if you're taking a risk on a substandard rubber boat that may or may not, or a raft that may or may not get across the channel, you want to be coming to the closest place possible. And so Lesvos represents that for many people who are doing the crossing from Turkey. So when you arrive on Lesvos, and you'll see on the northern part of that island just many discarded life jackets and bits of boats and such. And basically, people will go to the refugee camp there on the island, and you can imagine on the coast of this beautiful Aegean Sea, bright blue water, and a picture you might see in a travel magazine. But then on the coast there's a series of white tents and containers from container ships that are the housing units for the camp. And it's what they call an open camp, which means you can come and go. It's not a jail, but it is, you have to register to go into the camp and come out of the camp. And anyone who's not a refugee or working in the camp specifically is not allowed to go in the camp. So I saw the camp from the outside, but I was not allowed to go on the inside. And people are living in, I think of them like the plastic tents you would rent for a wedding, perhaps, but much smaller, house about 12 people per tent, as well as the containers that you would see from a container ship that have been reworked into essentially housing units.
So how many of them are allowed to stay?
Well, they have capacity for about 3,000 people right now. So it's in the EU's interest to keep people moving through the process. But they share their story in this narrative interview to get their first step in the asylum process. And then after that, they wait typically another several months, and then they move to a camp, a refugee camp in Athens, typically. Mm-hmm. And in that camp, they go through the next piece of the process, which is figuring out, getting a refugee passport, essentially, and figuring out where in the EU they could potentially land, whether it's France or Germany or Sweden, et cetera. Some go to Canada, some come to the US from there, but it's quite a lengthy and circuitous process, and people aren't allowed to work until they get to the stage of getting that essentially resident visa passport that enables them to work. So every single person I met was just so eager to get a job and start sending money to their family members.
You know, you started this program of teaching swimming.
Yeah.
Are there stories of people who took a rubber boat from Turkey to Lesvos and didn't make it because they couldn't swim?
Absolutely. I was there in June, and just in the first half of 2023, more than 2,000 people had drowned on that journey.
2,000 people?
Trying to make it to Greece, yeah.
Wow. So when you're teaching them how to swim, you're giving them not just a life skill, but a survival skill.
Absolutely. First and foremost, a survival skill. And I was reminded of that constantly in this experience. It reminds me of a university professor giving a lecture and then realizing that it's not landing in the real world. But I started with the things I was just describing to you about balancing in the water, rotating the hips. Here's how to do freestyle. And I had a Sudanese friend stop me for a second, and he said, "Teacher Becky, could you teach me how to save my friend in the water?" That's the first thing to learn. You could tell it wasn't a theoretical situation for him at all. And so that was a wake-up call for me in terms of what was bringing people there, and also just the courage to get back in the water after seeing friends and sometimes family members drown on the way there.
Okay, this is my friend Fuad Abdullah from Eritrea. I am curious, had you done any swimming before?
I have a little experience in swimming, but I have learned more in here in the camp.
What has been your favorite part of the swimming lessons?
The freestyle is my favorite.
Freestyle?
The phone freestyle, yeah.
That is great. What has been the hardest thing to learn? Most difficult?
The backstroke.
Backstroke?
Yeah.
Your backstroke's so good though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what are your hopes for more swimming in the future? Will you keep swimming?
Now I have no fear for the deep water.
Okay.
I can swim as long as I want.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So no fear of the deep water?
No. I had a great experience of swimming.
Happy. I'm
so
happy.
happy.
And you're a great friend too, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And a great swimming student.
Can you tell us about some of the people you taught? I mean, like the one who called you Mama Becky.
Yes.
How did he respond to learning how to swim?
It was incredible. He was from Sudan. We didn't have a pool, I should mention that. So we were learning to swim in the Aegean on a rocky beach with different goats running by. And it was quite a scene. And sea urchins on the bottom. So we were not in maybe optimal learning conditions, but we got into the water, and people, when I was first helping the folks who had never swum before, I can think of a woman, an Eritrean woman, who was holding on to my neck so tightly. You can picture just, clenching this. And so we got into the water, we sat down in the water. I encouraged her, invited her to sort of lie back in the water, asked if I could put my hand under her head and the backside of her neck, and had her let go of the bottom. And I just held her in the water there. And I asked then, could I move my hand now? And I did. And I told her, you're floating by yourself. You're doing this all by yourself. And she just started crying at the most joyful tears and just couldn't believe it. And she had her friends there. Amharic is their language. And so she started in Amharic, I learned later, saying, I'm doing it, I'm swimming. And we had her and many others within 3 or 4 lessons doing freestyle and actually, swimming quite well. But it was that initial breakthrough of realizing that the water didn't have to be a place of terrifying fear, but that it actually will hold you and in fact can be relaxing and therapeutic, and getting them to pull their chins off their chest and look back up to the sky and backstroke. It just floats your whole body. I always said, we're lying in a bed, not sitting in a chair, and like trying to get folks to put their heads back, and just seeing that connection with the water and with nature and with their bodies is just extraordinary.
Would you be teaching one-on-one, or would you have 3 or 4 that you would be teaching?
More like 20 to 30. And it was,
really?
That was actually a little tricky. Yes. Once the word got out that we were offering swim lessons, it was a big draw. It also was very, very hot there, and no one has air conditioning or anything. So the idea that perhaps you could cool off in the water and do it in a safe way was really a big deal.
I would love to know how many of you had done swimming before this summer? Has anyone done swimming, or this is the first time?
Yeah.
First time? Yeah.
First time.
First time. What were your favorite things about the swimming class?
Freestyle. I love you swimming techniques. Really, you are really very special.
Oh, thank you. You guys, it's been so wonderful to swim together, and I just love seeing how much joy, happy progress, and everyone is swimming now. Like, Lydia, your first day, you're already swimming. Second day, I mean, it's amazing. You guys really, I warm my heart and just give me so much hope.
We love you.
You too. So much hope.
My name is Yasin Musa from Sudan.
My name is Abdulaziz from Sudan also.
We had 3 days.
3 days, and you're already swimming.
Yeah, we started to get it. We know everything, new thing. We're going to perfect.
Amazing. Yeah, you guys have made so much progress. It's fantastic.
Yeah. There's a good teacher we have there. Rhea. And
Thank you.
That's very kind for you. good thing.
Oh, you guys are amazing. You guys are doing some really great things. So it's such a pleasure to get to swim with you.
Yeah, that is it. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for everything you do for us. Too kind.
There's more of my conversation with Becky Crowe.
I don't think I've ever been as at peace or happy as I was for that month, and probably my entire life, which is beyond what I expected of the experience, far beyond what I expected.
I'm Bill Bradley. We're back now on American Voices. We're continuing my conversation with Becky Crowe. When she learned of refugees in Lesvos, Greece, mostly from Afghanistan, Congo, and Egypt, Becky decided to help. She volunteered with an NGO to go to Lesvos, Greece, and teach the refugees how to swim. So, Becky, can you tell us about the man, I guess he's a friend of yours now, who's in need of a prosthetic leg and what his status is now?
He comes from Herat, Afghanistan, and his job at the organization was actually coaching and supporting the other coaches. So he's an incredible natural-born leader. He quotes Rumi in English and Farsi beautifully. He just is a very, very deep thinker about the world. It's extraordinary to me, maybe more so than anyone I've ever met. He has lived a life that most of us would think of as having extraordinary levels of suffering. And yet he continues to be one of the most optimistic, resilient people, believing that God has a plan for him. And each part of his step of his journey just felt like a gift to him. And he said, I never thought I'd get this far. So this is incredible. And then I never thought I'd get to this next level. He had lost his leg at 14. And he had not had access to any sort of specialized medical care since then. So his prosthetic was essentially built for a 14-year-old boy, but he's a 26-year-old man now. So his bone has kept growing. It's terribly painful to walk for more than a kilometer or so. And he and I became great friends. And he was then transferred to the camp in Athens after I left, but we were still in touch on an at least weekly, if not a couple times a week basis. His goal was to get to Germany. And just this last week, he got his passport, his refugee passport, transferred to Germany. And this has been, one would think, a joyful thing, but it's a little bit of it's a comment on just how convoluted and complicated this process is. Because I said, well, what happens when you get to Germany? How do you know where to go? And he said, well, I'll most likely get arrested in the airport, and then I will get transferred to a camp and then need to claim asylum in Germany now after going through this whole process in Greece. And he wrote me the other day and said, they asked me to sign something that I was breaking the law by planning to stay here for more than 3 months. And, can you help me talk to an attorney or someone who can help me understand the next steps of the process? So it's just one example of not having a clear roadmap or coherent set of policies around this. And I recognize that it's an extraordinarily complicated issue worldwide. So there's no easy answer here, but I think about, this is a person that any business that I know would want to hire this man. I mean, his level of resilience, of focus, of care for his family, his values, et cetera, is what every employer is looking for. The other piece I'll mention on that is, as you know, Bill, my brother and father are both in the medical profession, and my brother's an orthopedic surgeon. So with Marty, I asked my younger brother, Matt, who's a doctor at Mayo, if he had any contacts to help us figure out how to navigate this prosthetic situation. And one of his colleagues helped connect me with doctors at the University Hospital in Athens. And we got Marty to get his first specialized care in 12 years now, and got him all the way to the point of the folks there were ready to build a prosthetic for him. And then right in that moment, he got transferred to Germany, and he had 6 days to leave Greece. And the way the prosthetic process works is it's an iterative thing where you need to be in contact with your doctor, fitting it over time, et cetera. So now we're going to restart this process in Germany.
So now you call Matt and say, how about Germany? Can you help us out there?
That's where we're going next. If we could have him walking in a pain-free way, he is going to be, a world changer. Yep, absolutely.
What about your friendships with other volunteers at the NGO?
Oh, I made extraordinary friends there. It was such fun. And I felt like I came back to life again, because I think anyone who spends time around 20-somethings just can't help but soak in their energy and their optimism and, frankly, their activism. I saw in them. Sometimes I saw it as a bit naive, but that energy to believe that you can really change the world. And so I had a friend named Erica from Italy and Andrea from Spain, and a couple Greek friends who were just motivating me on a daily basis and teaching me how to use Instagram, things like this. I'm a little late.
You got to go to Lesvos to learn how to use Instagram.
I finally broke down and signed up, because there's no way I could keep in touch with all these folks if I didn't have it. So.
Well, are you in touch with any of the students now?
Yes, absolutely. Both the swimmers and both the refugees and the volunteers. We're still in close touch. Absolutely.
Texting?
Yeah, exactly. Typically, WhatsApp is the mode of choice for the international crew.
Hello, buenos dias.
Hello.
Could you share your name and where you're from?
I'm Andrea and I'm from Spain.
Great. And what are you doing here in Lesvos this summer?
I'm volunteering with yoga and sport with refugees in the gym, especially in the climbing classes, but also in other sports.
Great. What has been your favorite part of this experience so far?
My favorite part is sharing time and activities with all the people here, because I think we are a great community, and definitely spending time together and having fun.
Amazing. Thank you. And what would you want other people to know who aren't as familiar with the situation here? What are some of the most important things for them to know about the situation?
Well, I think we don't have many information about the situation. We don't know what is really happening here, and we have a lot of incorrect thoughts about what is going on. And definitely coming here is like change your point of view and change your mind about the thing that happened.
I am Becky Crowe. I am here today in Lesvos, Greece, with the most amazing team I have ever worked with, which is saying a lot because I've worked with some great teams before. And I'm excited to swim 6 kilometers today to raise awareness for yoga and sport with refugees and our Swim for Good campaign today. And we are psyched to do this. We're getting ready, and I'm celebrating my 50th birthday year with this swim, so I hope these youngins can beat me.
It's been, with the refugees at least, one of my very closest friends. His name is Fuad, and he's from Eritrea. He was one of my most dedicated swimmers, and I am also Mama Becky in his book, but he's about 25 years old, and he just wrote me the other day. He's actually at a refugee camp now in northern Greece near the Albanian border, and there happens to be another location of yoga and sport with refugees there. So he's got the support of that organization at his new camp as well. But he just got his first job. He is working in a chicken factory, working the night shift every night. And he sent a picture of himself with his plastic hairnet cap on. And he said, I couldn't be more thrilled to have my new job. And it is hard work, but I really so excited to have this job. And I was just thinking, for many of us, that job might not be the source of so much excitement, but just I think embodies the journey and optimism.
Knowing you as I do, you're probably helping them out in other ways too.
I have been. I've learned how to use Western Union to send money to people who don't have a bank account or an address, which has been a process, and had several of my bank accounts frozen a few weeks ago. And the fraud alerts were wondering why I was sending money to folks. But that's been really important because, for instance, when my friends were transferred to Athens, the refugee camp there was not feeding people, specifically was not feeding the single men. I thought, this is so outrageous. I can't even imagine this is true. But then it was person after person experiencing this. And it was framed as a technicality that they had gotten their asylum status, but hadn't gotten their work permit. So they weren't eligible for the food sources that the camp provided, yet weren't eligible to work yet in Athens. And so there was about a 3 to 4 week period where there was zero food available. And so in that moment, I just, with several other friends, just started with $50 would pay for a month's worth of food. So just trying to patch through for the people that I was in touch with to help them get to the next step. And one of those was Fuad. So now here he is with his job, and he's another one who's going to be a world changer.
Well, you've made a huge difference in their lives. You've launched them in many ways. That must be a tremendous feeling for you.
It feels great. It feels so clear and obvious to me. I can't imagine. It's a reminder that at the most basic level, when you're in a relationship with people, you share what you have, right? It's what we do for our families. And I haven't soaked in so much the feeling of I'm rescuing someone or saving someone. It hasn't felt that way to me. I think it's important that it not feel that way, actually. And if anything, I feel like what they've given me in terms of a renewed sense of what's possible in the world. And every Sudanese person I met, when they heard where I was from, they'd say, America, America. And just remembering that the ideals that our democratic potential is still a beacon that is driving people to take absolute life-risking journeys across many countries, across oceans, et cetera, to try to find a place that's safe and predictable and where they can
have a life.
And so all of that I think about that, and they've given me the greatest gift I could ever imagine in that respect.
So after this powerful summer that you had in Greece, what is it like being back? What do you miss?
Oh my gosh, I miss life there. I don't think I've ever been as at peace or happy as I was for that month, and probably my entire life, which is beyond what I expected of the experience, far beyond what I expected. I think there was something about the simplicity of it. I didn't have a car. I lived in a little village with a bike. I saw my community on a daily basis. I was not behind a Zoom screen all day. I was out working out and just being really physically active. And it was such a joyful experience. And I think that's one of the things that I took away. And I went there with, at different points in my life, I've struggled with depression, and I went with this challenge to myself. And that depression was often caused by losing faith in humanity and in the goodness in the world. And it's something I've been wired to be attuned to since I was a little girl. And I really had some big questions about, as Einstein or others would say, whether the universe is fundamentally friendly. And I think what the summer did for me was this ability to be side by side with people who had experienced a tremendous amount of suffering and still found belief and optimism and joyfulness and laughter and physical movement and dancing and dancing in the tarmac outside the gym to Eritrean music, you name it, just these moments of connection and joy that I think we're so desperate for as a planet right now and as communities. And so I was able to just live into that and have compassion for people's situations, but not have it sink me in terms of my own mental health. So
yeah, well, you were right for them and they were right for you.
it is. They always say healing goes two ways. It's two directions. So
yeah, it's so wonderful that you spent the summer. I remember talking about whether you do it or not, and you do it, and it just is repaid in thousands of ways and helping others around the world. It's amazing. And I'm just proud to love you.
Yeah, it was literally the night that your play premiered, and it was such a beautiful moment and a beautiful send-off, because I think your vulnerability in that and telling your story, it set up this incredible, I think, mindset for what I was about to dive into and was able to get so much out of. You asked about coming back as well. And I think for me, coming back has been, of course, I was away from my beloved son for 7 weeks. So I was really looking forward to being back with him. But I think the biggest things have been realizing how much distance we have here between our daily lived experience and the lived experience of people making these migration journeys all over the world, whether they're coming here from Venezuela to the US on our southern border or making the journey into the EU. I've been really committed to trying to raise awareness and help to tell people's stories and humanize this experience and reframe the narrative that some people might have. So I've had a ton of fun talking to people about this, and also just getting folks who are in my swimming community that I've built over 40 plus years excited about ways to either volunteer next summer or get swimming equipment suppliers to provide the things we need in Greece. Also to raise awareness, especially as we're coming up on the Olympics in Paris next summer, where France is so central to the refugee journey and in the EU, to really raise awareness about the stories of people making the journey.
Well, I hope you do speak to the swimming community, and I'm very glad that you spoke with us today.
I am so grateful for the opportunity. It's been such a pleasure. And you don't have to go to Greece to volunteer. I think that's the other piece. I would love to highlight a new program that the State Department has created called the Welcome Corps, where 5 families in the U.S. can come together and privately sponsor a refugee to come, or a refugee family to resettle in the U.S. The program was modeled after a successful program in Canada and just launched in 2023. And I know the program is looking for more teams of families to come together and participate in the Welcome Corps. It doesn't require a great deal of money. It is really focused on taking our time and forming those connections and relationships with families and helping them to navigate things like signing up for the school system, getting connected to resources in the community, and really getting to know life in America and what's possible here. So really delighted about this program. And if folks are interested, they can get more information at welcomecorps.org.
Great. I've been speaking with Becky Crowe. When refugees come from Turkey to Lesvos, Greece, while they're waiting for asylum, she taught them how to swim. It's part of a mission of the NGO called Yoga and Sport with Refugees. To find out more, visit us on Facebook. It's American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. Love to hear from you. Write me. We're also on Instagram, so I hope you check us out there too. Follow us. Every time you laugh just a little, take one step closer, solving the riddle. It echoes over the world. Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.